Welcome, Right Riders. Thank you so much for joining me on today's live stream. If you're catching us on the replay, sorry we missed you. Thanks for tuning in. Let's see. Just want to get some people some time to join us. If you're here, fire up the chat. Let me know you're here. Throw up some emojis. This isn't Twitch. No lurkers. Come on. Let me know you're here. Then you can lurk. But let me know you're here. Emojis. Let me know. Let's see. Want to make sure that everything is working. All right, so we'll move this over. Okay. How good is your picture book? Do you have the best book ever? A lot of aspiring authors have these dreams of writing a kid's storybook, but they soon realize that it's not quite as simple as they thought it was. Trust me, I know, I've been there many times myself. So today, I'm going to give you some tips and ideas for writing a children's book, as well as ways to help determine how good your children's book really is. But first, let's check out the chat. Let's see, I know the Lady Writes is here. I saw her here. Thanks for the emojis. Glad to have you here. I see a couple other people lurking. Hey, don't be shy. It's free. Throw in an emoji. Let me know you're here. All right, well, we're going to get started. Now, just a little disclaimer. Though I'm mainly going to focus on how to write a better picture book, most of these questions and tips can also pertain to how to write a better fiction book and even how to write a better nonfiction book. So if you don't write children's books, don't think this isn't about you. A lot of these will pertain to you as well. So let's get started. Here's the main question you need to ask yourself, and that is, do you want to do this for fun, or do you want to do this as a profession? And let me just start off by saying there is no right or wrong answer, trust me. I know a lot of people who they've just had this dream of writing a children's book. Maybe they've been telling this story to their kids, or it's been passed down from generation to generation, and they just want to see it in a tangible form. They want to see it in a book, and that is completely fine. Maybe, give a couple books out for Christmas, maybe sell a few, but it's not necessarily your dream to quit your day job and do this as a career. That's fine. But if you do want to do this as a career, you want this to be your profession, you need to keep either one of those, however you feel about that, whether you're doing it for fun or as a profession, keep that in mind when we address these next few questions. Did you write it? Did you get it right the first time? Is the version that you want to print, or maybe you already did, maybe you've already created it and you want to know, was it good? That's fine. Ask yourself, is the way that you have it right now, is that your first draft? If it is, chances are it's not the best it could be. Now, yes, there are unicorns out there that just get it right the first time, but majority of us, whether it's a children's picture book or a fiction book or nonfiction, chances are you didn't get it perfect the first time. And the truth is it may never be perfect, but there's a difference between good and great. And especially if you want to make this a profession, it needs to be great. It needs to be the best it can be. As competitive as the market is right now, especially with children's picture books, you need to make your book stand out as much as possible. So if the version you have ready to publish or already published is your first draft, chances are it's not the best it could be. So the question is how do I make it better? The real thing, especially if you want to go traditionally published, and we'll talk a little bit more about traditionally published in a second, but if you really want to get traditionally published, you need to be willing to take suggestions, criticisms, maybe do, some tweaking of the words, and maybe even a complete rewrite. I'll be honest, there's a couple clients that I've had over the years who, they've given me their copy of their book, and they've asked me for my critiques. And at the core, majority of them are good books. The concept that they're starting with, their base, is a good concept. The only issue may be the words around it. Very seldom do I have one where it's just not a good idea. So as long as you keep that core idea in mind and you're willing to maybe tweak the words, maybe do a complete rewrite, then you've got a much better chance of getting that great book that you really, really want. And even if you want to do this just for fun, you still want that book to be as great as it can be. So here's a fun exercise that I've done with some of my clients. Take your current book in the current format that it's in and put it off to the side. Don't look at it again. You already know it inside and out. You may not know it word for word, but you know the core of the book. You know what the premise is. Now I want you to take that and I want you to rewrite your book, but write it from a different tense. So if you wrote it in past tense, like Curious George series, George and the man with the yellow hat went to the zoo. So change the tense and make it present tense. Or if you wrote it in present tense, make it past tense. So it's a completely different take on your book. And I mean, these are picture books, so chances are it's not going to take you long to do. And after you're done with that, or maybe if you don't feel comfortable doing it that way, think about changing the point of view. So if you wrote it in third person, which most children's picture books are third person, try to write it in first person, as if you're the main character. And that way you can give a whole new experience to your reader. Now, once you have those different versions, then you can look at them and see how you can better your original book. Because although you've told that story 100 times, it may not be the best it could be because it's just the way you've known it. But by you rewriting it without looking at that original, you're going by your memory and using new words that aren't copying word for word from the original. You've got a much better chance of finding words that better the original copy. And it may be the new point of view mixed with a different tense is perfect. It's the way you want it, and it's nothing like your original, or it may be some kind of Frankenstein version of all three. But I have found that this helps my clients so many times, even if they don't go with those new tenses or new point of views. It gets them thinking in a different way, and by not looking at the original, it completely takes that out of the picture and forces them to basically rewrite the story. Now, if you're writing a 75,000 word fiction book, I don't expect you to do that with that. But for children's picture books, absolutely, you can rewrite that story based on your memory, based on new words. Because if this is an old story, you've got a larger vocabulary than you once did. So you may find better ways to say that. So many people think that writing children's picture books are easy because there's so few words. And I've talked about this in the previous videos, but because there's so few words, that's what makes it so difficult. Because you need to make sure that each of those words are profound and well chosen. So if you can find one word to replace two words in your current book, then do that. So it packs more of a punch with using less words. Okay, the next question is, does your character grow? In your current book, is your character growing from point one, from page one, to point B, the last page of the book? Have they grown? Not necessarily, a completely different person, but have they learned something? Have they accomplished something? With children's picture books, your reader is learning with your character. So if they're at page one, and they've got a certain mindset or a certain thought, and they haven't changed any way, shape, or form by that last page, then what was the sense in reading your book? What was the point of it? And the same thing can be said for any fiction book and even nonfiction. Nonfiction authors may think this has nothing to do with me because I don't have characters in my book. But you do. Your character is your reader. So if your reader hasn't learned anything from point one to the last page of the book, why did they buy your book? Why did they read your book? So getting back to picture books, if your character, at least one of your main characters, if they haven't grown in any way, shape, or form from page one to the last page of the book, then it can be a better book. There are things that you can do, ways that you can make that book better. Probably the best example I can think of not just a children's picture book, but just a story in general, is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, that's probably the epitome of what a good book should be. And, you know, did the characters learn anything from from page 1 to the last page? Yes. The bears probably learned to lock their doors before they leave. You know, Goldilocks, she probably learned, hey, you know, I shouldn't be going into strangers' houses. And to be honest, she shouldn't be walking in the woods by herself, but that's for another day. So you want your character to learn something, to grow, and it doesn't have to be some huge epiphany, moral of the story kind of thing, but just something, something that has changed about them from the first page to the last page. Does your story have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Yes, that pertains to children's picture books just like it does to a novel or anything else. There needs to be a three-part structure, if you will. But it doesn't have to be like really profound in each area, but you need to be able to see that there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the way to tell if your book has that is, can you sum up your story in 3 sentences? Or just one big long sentence, however you want to do it. But basically, first this happened, then this, and then the end this happened. That is your beginning, your middle, and an end. And if you can't do that, then again, your book can be better. Getting back to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. In the beginning, the bears were eating, and then they decide to go for a walk. Goldilocks walks in. This is the middle. Goldilocks goes in, causes all kind of ruckus. And in the end, the bears come home, see what she did. She splits. Beginning, middle, end. So again, if your book doesn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end, then it can be a better book. It can be restructured. I'm not saying a complete rewrite, obviously, but there are ways that you can better define the different areas. How long is your book? Children's picture books are typically no more than 500 words, usually less than that. So the question is your book a picture book, or is it just a children's book with pictures? Early reader books have pictures in them, but they usually have longer words, or longer count of words. So you need to know this. This really doesn't pertain to like how to make it better per se, but I mean it does in the fact that, like I was saying earlier, if you can find one word to replace 2 words, shorten your word count, and still make your story and your book profound, then you absolutely want to do that. But the important thing is if you just have a children's book with pictures, you need to know that for when you decide to go in and set up your categories, set up your keywords. That's why that element is so very important, is because you don't want to say this is a picture book and it's 1,000 words. You're going to get very few sales because it's just going to be too long or you're going to get negative reviews. It's just going to be too long for that age group. So if you do have more words than 500 in there and you can't really condense them into something that is close to 500, typically mine usually run around 250 to 300 words, then you might want to consider maybe your book is really for early readers. And again, that's fine, but you need to know that. Now I've got one more tip, and this is probably one of the biggest ones. But before I give that, I want to know what you guys think. Can you think of any other ideas to tell and to make a children's picture book better? So let me know in the comments and in the chat, and also let me know what you think about some of these tips I gave. Did anything surprise you? Did you already know all of it? If you knew it all, maybe your book is perfect. But let me know in the chat and let's see what everybody has to say. And while I'm waiting on those responses, I'm going to get to my very last tip. And this is probably one of the biggest ones. When it comes to children's picture book, don't explain everything with your words. It's a picture book for a reason. You want to let the children use their imagination. If your images are basically a restating of the words in your book, then one of those 2 things can be done better. you want your words to be powerful. And again, children's picture books are short on words anyway, but you want the image to tell them so much more than what your words do. So as long as they correlate, they make sense, the words with the picture. But again, the picture should have so much more to it than just a restating of your words. Again, that's what's really going to make the child love your book. Good storyline, good some kind of learning. Like I said, they have to grow from point A to point B. That's what's going to get the parent interested. But those illustrations and having the illustrations make them think and really draw their imagination is what's going to keep the child engaged. And that is what's going to get them to want to buy your next book. So obviously the parent's the one buying it, but it's the child's engagement and how much they enjoy it that's going to get them to go back and buy another one of your books, and so on and so forth. So keep that in mind, that you don't want to say everything with your words. And a lot of that, if you have an illustrator that's doing your images, you can give them the words to your book and let them use their imagination when they're doing the illustrations. So don't be like, okay, I want it to be this, this, and this. You can give them some ideas, but let them do what they do best, and that is the illustrations. Now, if you're doing the illustrations yourself, whether you're taking things off stock image sites and you're kind of creating them yourself, like some of the videos I've shown, that's great. Keep that in mind. Don't just have, if we're going to do a man with a yellow hat, don't just have the man with the yellow hat and, grass behind him. Have some other things going on in the background, things that will draw the child's engagement and attention and enjoyment. And again, that will better your chances of not only having a really, really good book, but it'll also better your chances of that parent buying your next book. So those are the ones I had. I do want to talk a little bit about traditional publishing, but first I want to go to the chat real quick. Let's see who else is in the house. The lady writes, Oscar's in the house. Hello from Spain. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's see. Underground Toy Society. Hey, so glad to see you here. I know you write children's books. Your books are really, really good. So I'd love to hear if you learned anything from this video. Let's see. Yvonne Jones, thank you so much for joining us. ERI Media, hello. Thanks for being here. Let's see. I hadn't thought about the rewriting perspective. Yes, that's one of the things when, like I said, when I talk to some of my clients and they're like, I don't know what to do. This is the way I've always learned. I've always told the story. This is the way it's always been. My kids love it. And let's be honest, if the only person or people that you're having look at your book are your children and your family, they love you, they're going to say it's great. Especially children, they say children say the darndest things, but to be honest, when it comes to their parents and guardians, they really want to make you happy. So they're going to say something is great, even if it can be better. And so that's one reason why I say don't even look at your original and just go with a fresh set of eyes and rewrite it. And like I said, change the tense, change the point of view, maybe change both. You never know what could trigger the difference between a good book and a great book. Let's see. How do you pick the sections you want to be illustrated? That's a really good question. To be honest, when I have an illustrator, I give them the words and I let them decide. Like I said before, that's what they do. That's their passion. And so Mimi's adventure book, the one that I had, one of the ones I've had done with an illustrator, his illustrations were amazing, like far beyond what I could think of. Truth is I actually wrote that book shoot, 18, 19 years ago for my oldest daughter. And it took that long before I could find an illustrator that could really wow me with their illustrations in comparison to my book. And so that's what now when I'm doing my own illustrations, what I typically will do is, for a children's picture book, you want a lot of, you want basically every page to have pictures on it. It needs, I mean, it's a picture book for a reason. It needs to be, very heavy on the images. So what I typically will do is whatever the core statement of that particular page, or if I have 2 pages, it's called a spread. If it's on 2 pages when you open it up, if the spread has just one general feel to it, I will do that as a spread image, a spread illustration, and then, like I was saying before, I will put little things in the background. Maybe a little bird over here with a stick or something like that. Things that will again trigger ideas and things like that with the child. So every time they read that story, they're noticing different things about the book. One example is in Mimi's adventure, the red balloon actually is a pretty major character in the story, even though it doesn't talk or anything like that because it's a balloon, but it's a major character. But it doesn't show up until probably I think page 4 or 5. But what you don't realize is that it's actually in the story on every single page, but it's in the background and they don't realize it until it makes its appearance. And then the next time the children go through the story, they're like, oh, there it is. It's kind of almost like a Where's Waldo. They didn't realize it was there because it didn't mean anything to them at that time. So to answer your question, I take, like I said, for each page, I try to do at least one image on each page, or I'll do a spread, one of the two. But every page, if you're doing a children's picture book, has to have an image. Now, if you're doing something else, if you're doing an early reader book, then you don't need a picture on every single page. And as the age group goes, as the age of your ideal reader goes up, the number of images typically will go down. Like for example, a chapter book, you'll probably just have one image at the beginning of every chapter, usually on the chapter page, or it'll be the last page of the chapter will have an image, things like that. And then they also don't typically have to be color images. With the older groups, you can actually just get away with black and white, which makes your book a lot cheaper to print, which boosts up your royalties, but still. So then it's more of a, you can find, if you're doing for an early reader, you can find in that, those probably, I would say every 5 to 7 pages, which page really deserves an image. And then when you do that, you need that image to try to encapsulate so many of the things that's already happened. So it just means that one image needs to be that much more powerful. So it's kind of the opposite with a picture book, where the picture book, you want, your words are so few, so the words have to be powerful. When you start moving over to the early readers, you've got more words and less images. So when you do have an image, that image has to be more powerful. I hope that answers your question, Katrina. Let's see. Yes, I've been considering that my books are longer and that maybe I need to refocus to an early reader version of my books. Yeah. It's a lot of people think that early reader just means that I'm using bigger words, and that's not really the case. It's a completely different. I'm not completely different, but it's a different mindset. And that's one thing that I see so many people talk about children's books, and they just use that general topic and that general term. And I've talked about this before, but children's books are everything from concept books, which are for babies, usually 0 to 2, and then all the way to technically young adults. That's all considered children's books. And and each of those different elements along the way, each of the different steps, there's different nuances and tropes and things like that to expect, that you need to include in that in order for it to be accepted as an early reader book or a chapter book. And even chapter books, they start off as early reader chapter books and so on. There's different levels of chapter books before you get to middle grade and then young adult. And so, and if you guys are interested in the other aspects, I can do videos on those as well. But just let me know in the comments, in the chat, whatever. But yeah, so absolutely take your story. I actually have a young adult, one of my young adult novels, and I'm now planning out a middle grade series for that. So it's, like I said, it's going to be the same genre and the same niche, if you will, but yeah, it's completely different as far as what's expected and what they've come to get used to. So yeah, I would absolutely try to do an early reader version of your books, and even go into the Amazon, look at early reader books, because chances are you're only comparing it to picture books because it's a picture book, but look at the other early readers, because you might not have to tweak much in your current series to make it considered an early reader book, because early reader books can be heavily image driven. So check that out, because you may not have to tweak anything except for your categories and your keywords. That may be all you need to do. You may not have to rewrite anything as far as your story is concerned. So yeah, think about that, and let me know. You can, obviously you're in my Facebook group, so you can hit me up in the Facebook group or just message me. Let's see. Sarah's in the house. Thoughts on copywriting your book artwork? If doing a series, would you wait until it's all done so you could protect it as one story, one copyright, then break apart, or release a story at a time? Those are some really good questions, Sarah. It depends. As far as copywriting, technically speaking, your story, the moment it is in digital form, is already copyrighted. It's, you can, like, if you write a story and you put it on Amazon and someone else tries to rip off that story, you can go to Amazon and say, hey, I published this first, it's mine, and then they'll pull that one down. Now, if you want to get technical and you want to, like, cover yourself so that way if you have to go to court, you can do that, then yes, here in the States, you'll go and actually do a copyright at the Library of Congress. You can just go on the website and do that. And I believe, as of the recording of this, I think it's $35 still to do that. You would have to do, to the best of my knowledge, a separate copyright for each book, because it's technically a different entity, even though it's a series. Again, I personally have never copyrighted any of my books. I have had people try to steal some of the content that's in it. Like I said, I just go over to Amazon, send them a message, or I usually do it through KDP, send them a message, let them know, and they take care of that, and then I get a message saying it's been taken down. So I'm not really too concerned with that. But if you want to do that, that's how you would do it. If you're somewhere else besides the U.S., you'll probably just have to go online and see how to apply for a copyright in your particular country. Let's see. Lois is in the house. Sorry I arrived late. Did you discuss point of view on the main character? I'm stuck on that. Point of view, yes, I actually did very briefly. Basically what I was saying is it's different. The point of view you use is going to completely change your story. So especially if you're doing a children's picture book, I would just write it in two different point of views. I've very seldom seen anybody really be able to pull off a second person point of view, which is where you're basically talking about you, as in you, the reader. Very few have been able to pull that off. Usually you're going to see third person or first person. So I would write it in both, and reach out to some people, again, not family and friends. Reach out to some maybe some social media groups that you may belong to that have to do with writing. I belong to a few of them, and they're great as far as like helping work things out and take suggestions. Obviously, if it's more than a picture book, if it's a, if you're writing a, young adult or anything like that, then just give snippets, because most of the time you're not going to get someone that's going to read the entire book. But and I'm not even suggesting write the entire book in one point of view and then the other, but take key parts of your book. Figure out whatever's the most, I would say the most boring part of your book, which is usually going to be towards the middle 25%, where you're kind of like setting the ground on things, and then the most action, and write those two areas in third person and first person point of view, and then get people's take on it, see which ones they prefer, because especially if you can go to people that are more of your target audience, then they're going to be able to give you what they would like, and they're the ones that really matter, because they're the ones that would potentially be the ones reading it. If you're doing it for a children's book, it's a lot easier, because chances are it's only going to be, like I said, 500 words or less, and then you can just rewrite the whole thing in the two different point of views. And obviously when you're writing a story, very seldom do you want to like combine point of views in the same book. That's usually, unless you're like super experienced, I wouldn't suggest that. But once you look at the two, and you get basically beta readers to give their insight into which ones they prefer, then you'll know which would work best as a general rule. I hope that helps. Let me know if it didn't, and then I'll see if I can help out a little more. Let's see. Yvonne asks, I work at a community center and had a few kids read a portion of my manuscript. No pics yet. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. They were engaged and wanted to read more. Can't wait to see how the pictures will help. Yes, absolutely. That's one thing. I absolutely suggest that you do that. If you have the manuscript without the images, two things I would suggest. One would be have your ideal reader try to read that, because then they're using their imagination. That's how you know how good your words are, because that's all they have to go by. If your words aren't engaging to them, then you're basically going to be relying solely on your images. And the best books are going to be ones that do it both with the words and with the images. But the other thing I would do is I would actually ask them, what do you see when you read this page or whatever. Maybe not ask on every single page, but then you can get their ideas, and then maybe give some of those ideas to your illustrator, especially if it's an illustrator you've never worked with before, because if that child saw it that way, chances are that at least some other children are going to see it that way. And obviously not telling the illustrator you have to do this, but just to give them some kind of guidance, and that could really help them figure out what your ideal reader is looking for in an image format. Sarah arrived late. Not sure if you covered it, but I'm curious also about color palettes in children's illustrations. Target audience, brighter colors versus more natural. And feeling a bit stuck doing my own artwork. Okay, that is another great question, Sarah. With the younger age groups, they're all pretty much younger when it comes to children's picture books, but the younger ones, depending on the words that you're going to use, if you're going to be more the concept book type book, or more like let's say 2 to 4 year olds, then you want to make sure that it's more of a bright, vibrant palette that you use. As you get older and as you get closer to the 500 word mark, then you're basically going almost over to early readers, and that's when you would do more of a natural colors, less vibrant type of illustrations. I've seen books that do both, but again, you also have to remember that you want to keep them engaged, and the younger kids, they're more engaged with those brighter colors as opposed to more of a pastel type. Those are more for the older, so I would say those would be more like towards the 4 to 5 year olds. And again, a good way to tell is how your word count increases. That's going to be, the age group is probably going to change a bit too, and that's when you can do that transition from the vibrant colors to the more pastel. Kevin, YouTube didn't send you an email. I am so sorry, buddy. Yeah, I was actually working with Dale trying to figure that out. What I'm going to start doing is everybody that's on my YouTube email list, which if you want to join that and you want to see what I'm doing outside the old YouTubes, you can go to kwheelerbooks.com/news and you can sign up for my newsletter. I'm going to start launching off an email probably an hour before I go live every Wednesday, just as a reminder. So I know you're on one of those lists, so I'll make sure that I start triggering that out starting next week. Kevin, very perfect. My daughter's 6, and you get maybe 5 minutes before she's ready to move on. Absolutely. I mean, nowadays people's attention spans are so limited anyway, but especially a child's, and that's why now I would say for the 6-year-olds, maybe not do so much of the bright, brilliant colors, but that's again the images, stuff that happens in the background. Again, not only does that engage their imagination, but it also helps them, like I said, when they can go back and read the book over and see things that they hadn't seen before. That's if you've got books when you were a kid that you've read over and over and over again, chances are that's why you did it. It probably wasn't so much the words that were in the book as those illustrations, at least if it's a children's picture book. The lady writes, I just started working on children's books and activity books for children with my daughter. She's the illustrator and we write together. This is great help. I'm glad you find it helpful. Yeah, I can't wait to see how those illustrations come out. I know you were talking about that on your channel, which if anybody wants to check out, The Lady Writes, she has I think it's a young adult series, and she's giving some updates on that. And she just started doing lives. So if you guys want to check that out, you can just click on right next to her name and check it out later, not now, later, and check it out. So those were, like I said, those were the ideas I had on how, like I said, majority of them, they all have to do with children's picture books, but majority of them pertain to, like I said, just how to write a better fiction book, how to write a better nonfiction book. You want your reader to be engaged. You want them to grow. You want them to have a 3-part structure, and you want, like I said, chances are that first draft you have is not the perfect one. It's not. I don't want to say perfect because it's really, most artists, authors aren't ever pleased with their work as far as perfect. But again, the difference between a good book and a great book, and that's the great thing about print on demand is you can go back a year from now and do a second edition of that book. Maybe something's better, or if you've already published it and you're thinking, okay, great, now I know it's it's not a great book, it's just a good book. You can go in there, you can make some changes, you can either update the current interior, or what I would suggest is just do a second edition. That way you still have the first edition out there, and then this new edition has new elements to it. So don't underestimate the abilities and the power of print on demand. Would love a focus group of parents and with kids of certain ages to test our stories. Yeah, that would be great. I know on Facebook there are a lot of groups that pertain to pretty much all the different things you can think of, really. So go in there and search for something like parents of this age group and see what kind of groups are there, and just reach out and ask. Yeah, you may get no's, but it's not, first of all, it's not in person, so it really can't hurt that much, and you never know until you ask. Kevin McGuire, awesome. Oh, okay, so you're talking to That Lady Writes. My daughter has 2 years of art so far and will continue. I'm hoping she will be my illustrator for everything. Yeah, that would be great. My kids, I've got some older kids, and actually most of my kids are older now, and they dabble in illustrations and stuff like that, but they've all basically said they don't feel comfortable doing the illustrations for my book, and that's fine. Obviously, I don't want them to do anything that they're not comfortable with. So I said I was going to mention something about traditional publishing, and I am. Mimi's Adventures, which I self-published back in 2018, actually got picked up by a traditional publisher and has now been released. We made some tweaks and to it, very few wording changes. Actually, I don't think any wording changes, but they added a lot of things with just the illustrations and just little nuances here and there. So yeah, it's technically traditionally published, and I was reluctant. I didn't know if I was going to say anything on the YouTube channel because I didn't want. I know some people are going to be like, "Oh, you're a sellout" or whatever, and to be honest, it's actually the opposite. I finally decided to go with this route, and again, it's just for this one book. The rest of mine are self-published. To go with this route because I wanted to be able to give you, my viewers, that extra aspect of being traditionally published. So now you can get my feedback on being traditionally published as well. There are some YouTube channels out there where they talk about, this is, I'm a traditionally published author, and this is the process, and this is what I've learned, and that kind of stuff. And then you've got plenty that do self-publishing. But I don't know of any other one where they do both. And that's what I wanted to be able to give to you, the viewers, is my perspective on both. And, not just what I've Googled and, looked up online and what people have told me, third party, my own personal experience. So we'll see how that goes. If you guys want to learn a little more on how I did that, you can let me know, and I can do a video on that. It was a long, like I said, that book, literally I'd written 18, 19, somewhere around that years ago. My oldest daughter's 22, and she was like 2 or 3 when I wrote it. So it's been a long time coming. It was actually self-published first, which is very, very rarely will a traditional publisher take a book that's already published and republish it as a second edition. But this company, they were willing to take that chance because they saw the potential of the other books that I have planned in that series. So again, I'm really excited. I didn't know how everybody was going to take it. Looking at what the responses I'm getting, that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping everybody would be happy about it, and interested in the journey, because I'm interested in what's going to happen. I know that I only get quarterly royalties now instead of every month or every 60 days on KDP. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but they've got a marketing team that is working with me to help. Right now we're working on getting the book into Barnes and Nobles, and so we'll see how all that works out. So you're going to learn as I learn. Let's see what you guys have to say. Let's see. Thank you so much. Why would I be a sellout? That's funny. That was my wife's question too. Is why would you be a sellout? Because my thought is, and I'm the kind of person where I'm kind of like a lawyer. I can argue both sides of pretty much every situation, and I could see people saying, your YouTube channel is supposed to be about self-publishing, and now you're kind of throwing that aside and going traditional. And again, that's why I wanted to emphasize I'm not. I mean, I've got one book that's traditionally published, and I love self-publishing, and I don't ever, even if I got offered, I don't ever intend on stopping the self-publishing and being 100% traditionally published. I just enjoy the control, for lack of a better word, the control that I have with self-publishing. But yeah, so my wife was like, "Why would you be a sellout?" I'm like, "Well, everybody thinks a different way," and so that's why I wanted to emphasize that the final decision actually was because I think I could help the channel even more by giving a completely different perspective. Yvonne said ditto. Thank you so much, Lois. Look forward to hearing insights on the progress. It's awesome. Okay, so you guys would love to hear more about how I did that. Yeah, so sending you a tweet now. Yeah, you know, I'm on Twitter, but I don't update Twitter nearly as much as I should. Um, and Rhodey, see you joining in. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's actually been it's been a while. I mean, I signed it, signed the contract earlier this year, but you know, it's not it's not like self-publishing. It's not quick, and so it is officially live on 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 Amazon with the paperback and the ebook. It's a little bit bigger book. You know, the trim sizes that they use is different, and we're working on getting it in hardcover too. But the one thing that I did is because it was already published, I had the audiobook already done. And so in the agreement I did with them, and this is just, if you watch me long enough, you know I'm all about negotiating and stuff like that. I actually negotiated with them that they can have the paperback and the ebook, and I will take mine down, but the audiobook is mine. And so not only do I keep my audiobook that I already have out there, but the link to my audiobook is included in all of their marketing materials for my book as a whole. So as much as they're marketing my paperback and my ebook for them, they're actually also marketing my audiobook, which is just for me. So that was kind of something that I had in the agreement. So yeah, all of that is technically already out there. I know we've had sales. Like I said, we're working on the whole Barnes and Noble right now. There's a lot of nuances to that, and I'll do that in a whole nother video because I don't want this video to get too long, at least not about that. But yeah, so I will keep you guys abreast of that, but it's already technically live. That's brilliant. I assume you're talking, that the lady writes, I assume you're talking about the audiobook. Yeah, I told that to Dale, and he was blown away, but not surprised because it's me. But yeah, so does anybody have any more questions when it comes to children's picture books? Ways to tell if your book is good or great, and if anybody has some ideas, like I said, that I haven't thought of, let me know as well, because obviously I don't plan on knowing everything, and I want to, but I don't claim to know everything. That's what I meant. I don't claim to know everything when it comes to children's picture books, but I have been doing it for a hot second, or a long cup of coffee, however you want to word it. And so these are the things that I've learned. These are the things that I have suggested to my clients, especially that, like I said, the little exercise on rewriting the point of view, rewriting the tense, and that really seems to just trigger all different ideas. And I've had people tell me that not only does it trigger ideas for that book, but because they've changed the point of view, especially, it's actually triggered ideas for another book. And so just again thinking outside the box. Just because it's the way you've always known it, just because it's the way you've always read the book, doesn't mean it's the only way the book can be, and it doesn't mean it's the best it can be. Can we use vellum for picture books? That is a great question that I don't know the answer to because I don't know anything about vellum. I know what vellum is. I don't use Scrivener. I don't use vellum. Michael Laron uses vellum like crazy, as far as I know, unless he's changed it. But I think he's gone to the vellum, and I don't think he does picture books. So I would love if anybody uses vellum to try it as trying using picture books with it, and let us know. Drop it in the comments. I would love to hear it, and if you can, I'll look into it. I'll look into doing it myself, and we'll see. Kevin, I've heard vellum isn't good for photo-heavy books. Okay, you haven't, but I've never tried it for that. Okay, so, like I said, I've only known it for actual text-heavy books. So, like I said, mostly young adult novels are the ones that I've seen, or just regular fiction books that I've seen people use vellum for. So honestly, I don't know. But I would love to know the answer to that. So if anybody does know the answer, let us know. Sarah, do you know of any example authors who have created a brand on their books similar to how Disney has gone to town with it? Well, I mean, obviously you can think of Dr. Seuss and ones like that. As far as self-published, no, but I mean, I don't. I'm kind of, when it comes to branding and stuff like that. I mean, I've started doing it myself. You know, I have suggested numerous times that even if you are self-published, one way to make your book stand out and to look more professional is to get a logo made. You can go on Fiverr, get a logo made, and you know, and put that, you know, that little branding on all of your books. Again, it just makes it look that much more professional. That much, you know, obviously you're not lying and saying you're traditionally published or anything else, but it makes it stand out a little bit more. You know, and then of course when you I have series, and I make sure that obviously there's things that are similar between each book in the series. But one thing that I actually learned from Michael Oran is you want to, the way you have your name put on your book, that can be branding in and of itself. And there are my dogs making a guest appearance. But yeah, so you can absolutely do that. Drop it. Anyway, okay, so I use vellum for young adult novels. Slides for low contents. Okay, Google Slides. Yeah, I use PowerPoint for pretty much my children's books, and my all my low content books I use PowerPoint. Let's see. How do you upload picture books? Good question. The way I do my picture books is I create the PDF file, and then I use Amazon's. I use the Kindle Kids Book Creator. It's also called Kindle Comic Creator, but that's what I use. I actually have a video on how to use that, and yeah, it's really quick, really easy, and it kind of betters your chance. So that way, it outputs it to the Mobi format that KDP is looking for, and that's how I do all of my children's picture books. Walter Wayburn's in the house. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Let's see. If I missed your question, just drop it again. Things are going a little fast. Thanks so much. Great content. Made my own Photoshop. I made mine in Photoshop, and it doesn't suck, surprisingly. I'm actually not surprised, Kevin, that your book does not suck. The content you're putting out in your books is just amazing. So yeah, I mean, pretty much everything that you're touching is turning to gold right now, and I'm so excited to see that. So, you know, children's book, why not? Go for it. Sarah, great, thank you. You're quite welcome. Anybody have any more questions? Let's see. Now, when you're ready to go beyond this and your book is as great as you can get it, I did a video on how to sell more children's books as well, and I'll include a link to that in the show notes below. And the you know, like I said, so if your book's already out there, don't think you have no chances or anything else. Oh, Kevin, you did your logo in Photoshop. Okay, that's great. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you can go to Fiverr, but if you can do it yourself, go for it. But yeah, doing a logo, regardless of what type of book it is, whether it's children's picture book or anything else, and keeping it consistent, that's a really good way to brand all of your books, so people can look at it and see, especially once they like one of your books, then that logo is just going to jump out at them. It's going to become familiar with them, like you said, like with Disney, or, you know, obviously probably not to that caliber, but not to that caliber, but you know, it'll make it stand out. Okay, let's see. Great live. Thank you so much, Weatherly. Thanks for joining. Until next time, I'm Keith Wheeler, and remember to write right.